First Samuyl Chapter 17. The Philistines gathered their armies together to battle at Succoth and Yada. They encamped at Ephes Damami, between Succoth and Azekah. Shaul and the men of Israel gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied a hill on one side, and Israel occupied a hill on the other side. And a valley lay between them. And a man from Gath came out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath, whose height was 6 cubits, and a span, probably about 9 feet, and 9 inches tall. He wore a bronze helmet on the head, and wore a bronze coat of mail weighing 5,000 shekels, about 125 pounds. He wore bronze greaves, armor on his legs below his knees, and had a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. The staff of his spear looked like a weaver's beam, and its iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, about 15 pounds, and his shield bearer walked ahead of him. Goliath came out and stood, and cried out to the armies of Israel, saying,
"Why should you even come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? Are you not the servants of Shaul? Choose a man for yourselves and send him out to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I fight against him and kill him, then you will become our subjects and serve us."
Then the Philistines said,
"I challenge and defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man so we may fight each other."
When Shaul and all Israel heard the Philistines' words, they were dismayed and terrified. Now David was the son of Yishai, the Ephrathite from Bethlehem in Yada, who had 8 sons. The man was well advanced in age, even during the days of Shaul. The 3 oldest sons of Yishai had gone to follow Shaul to the battle. The names of those 3 sons were Eliab, his firstborn, Abinadab, his secondborn, and the thirdborn was Shammah. David was his youngest. And the 3 eldest followed Shaul. David went back and forth from Shaul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And Goliath the Philistine came out and threw out his challenge 40 days, morning and evening. Then Yishai said to his son David,
"Take an ephah, about a half bushel of this dried grain, and 10 loaves of bread, and hurry to your brothers at the camp, and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their thousands. See about your brothers' welfare, then bring the news of them back to me. Shaul and they and all the men of Israel are in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines."
So David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with the keeper, loaded the supplies, and set out, just as Yishai had instructed him. He arrived at the camp, just as the army was going out to the battle, shouting their war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines, facing each other. David left his supplies with the supply keeper, ran to the battle lines, and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, there came the Philistine man from Gath, Goliath by name, coming out from the Philistines' army. He shouted the challenge in the same manner, and David heard it. When all the men of Israel saw the man, they fled from him and were terribly afraid. Now the men of Israel had been saying,
"Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to challenge and defy Israel. What shall we do? The king will give great riches to the man who kills him. He will give him his daughter in marriage, and the house of his father will be exempt from taxes in Israel."
Then David asked the man standing next to him,
"What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine, and takes away the shame and dishonor from Israel? Just who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should challenge and defy the armies of a living Father?"
The people answered him and repeated what they had been saying.
"This is what will be done for the man who kills him."
Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he had spoken to the men, And Eliab's anger burned against David. Then he asked him,
Why did you come down here? Who have you left those few sheep in the wilderness with? You proud and conceited of heart. You came here only to watch the battle.
David said,
What have I done now? What have I done to cause this?
Then he turned away from him toward another and said the same thing. And these men answered him just as the first ones did. What David said was heard and reported to Shaul, and Shaul sent for him. David said to Shaul,
Let no one become discouraged because of this Philistine. I, your servant, will go and fight him.
Shaul said to David,
You're not able to fight against this Philistine. You are only a boy, and he has been a man of war from his youth.
But David said to Shaul,
Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear would come and carry off a sheep from the flock, then I would go after it, strike it, and rescue the sheep from its mouth. If it turned upon me, I would catch it by its hair, strike it, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be just like one of them, seeing he has challenged and defied the armies of the living Father.
David added,
Yahweh, who delivered me from the power of the lion and from the power of the bear, he will save me from the hand of this Philistine.
Then Shaul said to David,
Go, and may Yahweh be with you.
Shaul dressed David for battle. He put a tunic on him, then a helmet of bronze on his head, then fastened a coat of armor on him. David fastened his own sword over the tunic and tried to walk around because he was not used to them. David said to Shaul,
I cannot walk out in these because I am not used to them.
So David removed them. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook, putting them in the shepherd's pouch he carried, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. So the Philistine came out with the man who carried his shield walking in front of him, and he began to close in on David. When the Philistine looked David over, he despised him. He only saw a ruddy, handsome youth. The Philistine said to David,
Am I a dog that you come against me with sticks?
and the Philistine cursed David with the names of his gods. Then the Philistine said to David,
Come here, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field.
Then David said to the Philistine,
You come against me with a sword, with a spear, and with a shield. But I come against you with the name of Yahweh Almighty, the strength of the armies of Israel, whom you have challenged and defied. This day Yahweh will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. This day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, so that all the earth may know there is a mighty Father in Israel. All those gathered here will know that Yahweh does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is Yahweh's, and he will give you into our hands.
As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David hurriedly ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone. He slung and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in David's hand. So David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it from its sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw their man dead, they fled. The men of Israel and Yada rose up and shouted. Then they pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were scattered along the Sharim road to Gath and Ekron. Then the children of Israel returned from pursuing the Philistines, and they plundered their tents. David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he placed his armor in his tent. When Shaul saw David going out against the Philistine, he asked Abner, the commander of the army.
Abner, whose son is this boy?
And Abner said,
As you live, O king, I do not know.
Then the king said,
Make inquiry about whose son he is.
Then, as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Shaul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. Then Shaul said to him,
Whose son are you, young man?
and David answered,
I am the son of your servant, Yishai, the Bethlehemite.